Hi, welcome to the Wolves and Sheep podcast. I'm Roberta Glass, and today I'm going to be talking to you about celebrity dupes and the West Memphis Three. Stay tuned.
I got a phone call from a very peculiar and interesting kid. He ended up just calling me all the time, almost every day.
The person on the other end of the line made a request I usually dread. Can I show you my writing? And when I read it, I thought, my God, this kid is incredible. I can't believe he's 15 years old. It was a story about balloons and heroin. If you look at The Outsider in fiction, the work of JT Laroy definitely seemed like the next step.
It was kind of like circulating for, like a year or two. Who is JT Laroy anyway? Who is he?
I was his entire world. I was everything to him. I was his mother, his father. He was in love with me.
I didn't believe that he was who he claimed he said he was.
First novel written by a 16-year-old, uneducated kid. Yes, of course that seems like a phenomenon.
It's all based in the human element. That's why it's so easy to join the cult. I was fooled, and I guess I wanted to be fooled.
Okay, so that was the trailer to The Cult of JT Laroy. Now, why am I talking about JT Laroy, and who was JT Laroy? Now, JT Laroy was a young writer that came on the literary scene in the end of the 1990s. He started getting his work published when he was 15. He was the product of a prostitute, truck stop prostitute mother, and he was a cross-dressing, formerly heroin-addicted, shy, terribly, painfully shy, so shy, in fact, that he never read his own work in public. He had celebrities read it for him. Celebrities like Sandra Bernhard and Lou Reed and Nancy Sinatra and Winona Ryder. And later on he did start to make appearances. Always very short, always in a wig and sunglasses, trembling as he read his own work. And then in 2005, New York Magazine, Stephen Beachy came out with an article asking, who is JT Laroy? And postulating that JT Laroy was a character, a nom de plume of Laura Albert, a mother of one young boy in her early 40s from Brooklyn. JT Laroy was from West Virginia. Laura Albert was from Brooklyn. And that article was followed by an article in the New York Times saying that the public face of JT Laroy was played by Laura Albert's boyfriend's half-sister, Savannah Knoop. And this caused quite a stir in the literary scene, but also the Hollywood scene, because a movie had just been made from JT Laroy's writing. And the movie was just coming out, and it was supposedly based on JT Laroy's life, even though it was published as fiction. And they sort of didn't know what to do, and all these celebrities who had gathered around and supported JT Laroy. First, he was sort of big in the literary world with Dennis Cooper and Bruce Benderson, and then he moved to the rock world with Stephen Jenkins of Third Eye Blind and Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins being a big supporter. Even Madonna sent JT Laroy a book. So he had become like a massive celebrity. Also, interestingly, a fashion pinup, doing a lot of fashion spreads in addition to writing kind of magazine articles. So I always think about JT Laroy because I was asked, I guess in the early 2000s to attend a reading of JT Laroy's because my friend was a fan. And I looked at the picture of JT Laroy and I just got a gut instinct that something was very, very wrong. And this was like, it was not right. Because he was supposed to be transgender, but he's dressed very mannishly. And my impression of transgender women is that they're kind of performing a stereotype of what they think being a woman is. Kind of like, very sexualized clothing, very high heels and tight shirts and stuff. And that wasn't the case with JT Laroy. And just gave me like a really odd feeling, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But I followed his career very, very closely and was not surprised when it came out to be a hoax. So the West Memphis Three case is really a rarity in that it had, and still has, so many celebrity supporters who donated so much money. And there is a huge overlap between the West Memphis Three supporters and the people who were, I guess, duped, I think, by the West Memphis Three cause, and the people who were also duped by JT Laroy. So, Marilyn Manson was in the JT Laroy movie, Heart is Deceitful Above All Things. Also, West Memphis Three supporter and good friend of Damien-Echols. Winona Ryder, also in the movie, also good friends with JT Laroy, also a big West Memphis Three supporter. I almost forgot Eddie Vedder, also a JT Laroy supporter and a huge West Memphis Three supporter. So, are these people particularly naive? Are they dupes? But I think what is interesting and why I played that trailer is it talks about outsider art or the appeal of the transgressive. And Damien-Echols was certainly sold as an outsider. And that is very appealing to celebrities. And I think these people don't look deeply into things. If they relate to it, then they kind of go with their gut, I guess. And the movies were incredibly persuasive. But I wonder now if all the celebrity supporters, it's very quiet. There's a few that you still hear from, like Henry Rollins still speaks out about it. But most of them are pretty quiet nowadays, now that Damien-Echols has dedicated all his time to practicing magic, and none of his time exonerating himself. And having a celebrity supporter also legitimizes you. So it's JT Laroy. There's a great documentary called The Cult of JT Laroy. Just ignore the other one, Author, which is basically an apology, and it lets the con artist tell the story. But The Cult of JT Laroy talks about how persuasive it is to have celebrity support. And the public, it's interesting to me because it's not like the public is looking for tips on like how to write a song from Billy Corgan. Billy Corgan might know something about music. Henry Rollins, I don't know what you think of his music, might know something about music. You might want to take a tip about music, but it goes so much further where we're thinking that because they were successful in life, that they are experts on our criminal justice system, or that their critical thinking is at a greater level than our own, or that they've even explored the court documents. We'll just let them do the thinking for us. If, Eddie Vedder thinks that the West Memphis Three are innocent, or Johnny Depp, they wouldn't risk their good name on guilty people. Or they wouldn't gamble their name on someone who's a totally fictitious person. And Laura Albert is, a grifter, is a con artist, a con woman, and I think possibly a sociopath. That's the vibe you get when you look into how that story played out and how she really manipulated people's emotions. And the West Memphis Three case is the same kind of emotional manipulation. Look at these outsiders, look at these victims, when they're really the victimizer. There's all this talk, the reaction among my left-wing friends, and I lean left on some issues, is that why aren't I talking about the criminal justice system, and why do I feel that everyone is guilty? I don't feel everyone is guilty. Just people with podcasts and documentaries tend to be guilty because there aren't a lot of documentaries and podcasts about non-guilty people. That's people were rightfully convicted. That's not much of a story. And the left loves this story that there is a kind of satanic panic that overtakes towns and causes innocent people to be persecuted and prosecuted. There is a wonderful book called The Witch Hunt Narrative by Ross Cheat. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, Cheit. He's a professor at Brown, and he investigates the satanic panic cases of the 1980s and finds that they weren't witch hunts, that most of those people were guilty, and that they have just been whitewashed and rewritten. And it is quite a heavily sourced and footnoted book. And I encourage everyone to buy it and read it. And before you point fingers in Facebook groups at people calling them crazy and making connections because there is no satanic element. If there is no, and I'm using the word Satanism broadly to describe, to include Crowley, Crowley and his OTO, the practice of magic. If that is not an issue in the West Memphis Three case, why did Damien-Echols, when asked by the police in his questioning, who did he think did it? He said, Satanists. Was he a victim of satanic panic? Secondly, why did he lie on the stand? When asked whether he read Crowley or not, he said, I know Crowley, but I've never read anything by him. When he wrote a piece for Vice saying, I was persecuted for my knowledge and love of Crowley. I had read everything by the time I was 12 or 13 of Crowley's. So he lied about it. And certainly his whole life is devoted to it now. All the material that came out from his storage locker of the materials that he had when he was on death row were about the occult. The majority of them were. Some of them were comic books and stuff and books, fiction books sent to him. But he was also writing, I am the devil. So the person that connects Crowleyism or the occult and the murder of Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Chris Byers is Damien-Echols himself. So I'm getting really tired of people calling people who point this out, who have just listened with a critical ear to Echols, crazy. And to bring it back to JT Laroy, the interesting thing about JT Laroy is that when the New York Magazine article came out by Stephen Beachy, that was not the end of the JT Laroy hoax. It went on. And the people that were crying the loudest about how Stephen Beachy, the author of the article, was just a jealous writer with an agenda, and JT Laroy was real because I held his hand and he calls me every night. That was, by the way, Laura Albert calling in a JT Laroy voice. So there was like two people playing JT Laroy, Laura Albert and Savannah Canup, when she had to be, a physical being. But Laura Albert was continuing this hoax all the time on the phone. The people that spoke the loudest and said, this isn't a hoax, and they wouldn't accept the evidence, were the celebrity supporters writing articles. So I find that I'm in a similar place with the West Memphis Three when I present to people Jesse Miskelly's multiple confessions, 3 of them recorded, 1 with his lawyer present, 1 with his hand on the Bible, failed polygraphs, no alibis, and let's talk about the candle wax. Someone made a great point online about the candle wax. If Terry Hobbs did this crime, what is the candle wax evidence doing on those kids' clothing? Was Terry Hobbs running through the woods with a pitchfork in one hand and a blue candle torch in the other? The blue candle was found amongst damien-echols things in his house. So, you have more than enough evidence against the West Memphis Three to say that they're guilty, and legally they're twice guilty, twice convicted. But if you continue to use your emotions, it's the same kind of thinking that says JT Laroy is real. He's real. I know it. I know it. We've had so many good talks. I know it. It's the same kind of thinking with the West Memphis Three were just wearing black walking down the street. Think about it. All right. See you back next time, guys.